3, 2, 1, go.
What's up, Chris?
What's up, Mike?
Not a lot.
We're
We're here for part 2 of the keto diet. And
oh, yeah.
just talking about health and fitness in general, relatively.
So much health and fitness, especially this week. But that's
For
a
you.
story for another time.
We'll talk about that in a little bit. One thing that we need to do is kind of recap what we've been talking about in the last episode.
Absolutely. We started talking about keto, the ketogenic diet, among other things. But mainly it was keto.
Yeah, and really we were going over a real basic explanation of a lot of this stuff, partially due to the fact that this shit is so complicated.
So much science.
Yeah, I mean, well,
that should be
I'm
a
not a
t-shirt.
doctor.
That should be a t-shirt, Mike.
I know.
So
All
much
hail
science. Oh, that too.
I like that one.
Much science.
So much
Bam.
science. No soy.
That's trademark Hardly Adults.
Yeah, no, nobody can take that. We'll sue you. So
we need the money. So I mean, kind of go for it. Try to take it.
Right?
We need somebody to sue.
Yeah, we need somebody to sue. Try and pay for all this shit. So one thing that we talked about was we talked about a lot of different things. We touched on that fasting is part of it. Touched on gluconeogenesis and didn't really go into the depth of how that works.
Autophagy.
Autophagy is part of fasting, and so we're going to go into some of these things a little deeper and give some actual studies because we've been doing some research, so we can actually give you the studies that we found. If you have information that conflicts with what we're saying, send it to us through our email or on our Facebook page at Hardly Adults, YouTube. Give us some comments and let us know where you think we're falling short on some of the information that we're given, or if you have other questions, let us know.
By the way, you can leave comments on SoundCloud. Mike stepped up and got us the Pro Unlimited SoundCloud, so we can get comments and see stats and see where everybody's listening from. We got listeners in the United States, Russia, UK, Australia. Dude, it's getting crazy.
Yeah.
We're blowing up.
Hardly Adults worldwide, wide.
Boats and hoes.
Boats and hoes. All right. So let's start out with a little bit of information on gluconeogenesis. Let me find some of these notes that I was working on.
So why don't you explain, though, what gluconeogenesis is?
Gluconeogenesis is the conversion of protein, and we now know and have known for a little while, but it hasn't been at the forefront of the conversation, that fatty acids can also be converted to glucose. And it's necessary because there are definitely some processes in the human body that require glucose.
Now, kind of going back into a recap, why is gluconeogenesis, why is that important with keto?
Because in keto, you are consuming little to no carbohydrates, so you're not getting the amount that your body needs to function properly. Your brain requires some 40% or more of glucose. There's a couple of other systems. I think it's like your pancreas is one of the...
Your pancreas is definitely one of them.
Yeah. That requires glucose to run properly. So,
well, your pancreas is kind of a meter for your blood glucose, really, from what I understand, right? Because your pancreas is what secretes your insulin. So, your brain obviously plays a huge part in that too, because your brain runs everything. But your pancreas definitely plays a huge role in blood sugar and insulin.
Oh yeah, definitely. So one of the things that you need to know about gluconeogenesis is that gluconeogenesis, everybody always says
Dude,
that
say
we
that
can...
10 times fast.
I know.
I'm serious.
I can't do it. There's no way. Gluconeogenesis, everybody always says, oh, go low protein when you're doing ketogenic diet. And that's not necessarily
Don't go low protein.
true.
I mean, definitely less than fat, right? But not
low. One of the main reasons, as far as my understanding, now I'm not a doctor, so I'm not claiming to be the highest professional of this stuff, but from what I've read, the studies that I've read, you don't need to limit your protein as much as people make it like. I mean, if you did a 50% protein, 50% fat, people are saying that you can change the amount of the effect of gluconeogenesis and how much glucose you produce
Less
by
corn,
just
more
raising,
meat.
yeah, just by raising your levels of protein. And we're finding more and more that that's not necessarily true. In fact, they've done some studies where they tried to alter the amount of glucose produced and have found that it's really difficult to change. I mean, it changes some. You ingest more protein, you're probably producing a little bit more glucose, but it's pretty minimal, especially when you take into account that you're in a ketogenic state, so you're getting a lot of your energy from ketones.
Right. Well, glucose plays a huge part in a lot of very negative health effects.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, one of them is right before we were doing this, we were talking about one of the things, which is in diabetes, and I was looking at some of the information about that. One of the things that is the inflammatory factor when it comes to insulin and having a high insulin resistance. It's not that insulin is directly inflammatory, but having high blood sugar is directly inflammatory. And when your body does not respond well to insulin, you're constantly having a high level of blood sugar, and that is inflammatory. Though that's only one study that I was looking at, and so I'm not.
So is just being overweight, though.
Confident.
I mean, being overweight, it is inflammatory in itself.
Oh yeah, and causes a lot of biochemical issues with hormones, because all hormones are lipid based. You're gonna have some issues with high body fat,
right,
affecting your lipid content, and it throws off your hormones.
So just to kind of rewind a little bit with the gluconeogenesis, so your brain and certain other certain other organs and parts of your body, they require glucose to function. Your brain being the main one. But what they're finding out is that you don't have to consume carbs or sugar for your body to convert that into glucose. You can get glucose from fat.
Oh yeah, you can get plenty of glucose from fat and protein.
And just to be specific, I think the three ketones, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's acetoacetate, beta hydroxybutyrate, and acetone.
Yeah.
Okay.
And acetone is one of the ones that gets converted into glucose
for your brain, because the ketones can cross that blood-brain barrier.
Yeah.
And enter your brain and feed your brain, essentially.
Yeah, it can feed your brain, but it also gets converted to glucose through the process of gluconeogenesis. And it's a super complex system. They were even in the article I was reading. Where was that? I would have to find that. The article I was reading was saying that it is absolutely ridiculously complex, even for biochemistry major students.
Dude, our bodies ourselves are super complicated.
I know.
I mean, it's nuts.
Well, and I feel like a lot of these things have a lot of outside factors, things that are constantly conflicting. Because you get different information based on slight different changes.
Clearly, we are the best source for your information, though. So keep
obviously.
listening to us, and don't listen.
We're science
Don't listen to
a doctor.
Yeah, well, no, I don't want to say. I don't want the liability of that. How are the adults told us to not listen to you?
Yeah, right. Oh,
no,
God.
listen.
Sued.
Yeah, no, we don't need that. But listen to us because we know our shit, basically. But a huge part of keto, and I hope I'm not jumping too far forward, is fasting.
Oh yeah, fasting.
Why don't you talk about fasting?
First off, just so you can look a little bit more at the gluconeogenesis situation, I just want to touch back on that real quick, because there's an article or a study was done by the American Diabetes Association that dietary proteins contribute little to glucose production even under optimal gluconeogenic conditions in healthy humans, meaning that the more you raise it, the more you lower it, it doesn't really have that big of an effect is kind of what they're talking about.
Why don't you
that I will post that link to that article
perfect
in Facebook so you guys can check it out, and then
Twitter.
also look for other ones if you want. Look for other information on that and let us know what it is. Now, to move on to fasting. Fasting is a good way to kick yourself into a state of ketosis really quickly.
Ooh, yeah.
Fasting plays a huge role in things like autophagy. Autophagy happens at a high rate when you're in a fasted state. A lot of people even work out fasted because your HGH levels are raised. God, I should have pulled up that article or that study that showed the HGH.
So I heard, just, from being a part of different groups on Facebook, there's several different types of fasting. Is one more correct than the other? Because there's people that go on egg fast, and there's people that do water fast, and there's people who say you shouldn't fast for, or that do 16-hour fast, and then there's people that say, oh, I've done 3 days or a week-long fast. And some people would say that sounds super, super unhealthy, and then other people say it's ultra healthy. So what's your take on that?
Well, it kind of depends on what you're going for. One of the things about fasts, as far as, I'm just going to have this one item, those kind of fasts are good in the sense that you're limiting your intake of other foods. That can be good to an extent because you're definitely going to be cutting out a lot of the negatives. Say you're cutting out carbohydrates. That's always a good thing relatively, for at least a period of time. That's one of the things that they say is the reason keto is good is because you're cutting out all the bad stuff and just focusing on a whole foods diet.
Processed foods. I mean, don't get me wrong, I still eat some processed foods.
Dirty keto.
Dirty keto. But, it's just to be able to do perfect, clean keto, eat only... no boxed food, grass-fed, organic beef, grass-fed chicken. Dude, I am broke. I can't afford that. So, I'm going to go to Walmart and I'm going to buy, the pack of steak that's, in the meat department. Don't get me wrong.
Best way is to go shoot your own.
Absolutely.
Go massacre a family of deer and you'll be good for...
But when I say I still eat processed foods, processed is pretty vague, but I don't go and buy bags of pizza bites or pizza rolls or whatever they're called, the Totinos. They're so good though, but I can't eat those. But that to me is considered like ultra processed. When I think of going and buying a bag of chicken, technically it's processed, but I don't really think of it as like a processed food.
Well, and it isn't a processed food. It just doesn't have all of the quality nutrients that you would get from something that would be more grass-fed or free range.
Because
that's the real big issue with.
And I guess diving into that, they say grass-fed because if the animal you're eating was raised on corn and grain, those food parts, they're going to get processed by that animal, and then you're eating that. So in a weird, I guess, roundabout way, you are consuming that, but you're really not because.
One of the issues though is when they're fed these negative plant materials. That's going to increase the amount of omega-6 fats versus omega-3s and
omega-3 is like fish oil, right?
Kind of. Some. It's also found in a lot of other stuff though.
Oh, okay.
Omega-3s, 7s, 9s. Those are found in a diverse bunch of foods. So trying to get a varied diet is actually really good for you because you're getting those other fatty acids that perform different functions. Though there is an argument to be made that high saturated fats is good for men because it is important in the production of testosterone. So no matter what,
eat more fried foods. No.
Yeah, fried. Fried as long as it doesn't have
carbs,
breading.
Right? Yep.
You're good.
Oh, man. It's so hard, though. We went to Buffalo Wild Wings, and I really wanted chicken wings. But I didn't. But I got the naked ones, or whatever they're called, that don't have breading. Still good.
Yeah,
But
true.
going back to
Grilled.
fasting, grilled is good.
Yeah.
Barbecued.
Oh yeah, the grilled chicken, especially if it is like on an open flame, and you get that smoky flavor.
Oh yeah.
Oh, the flavor.
So you mentioned it before, but what is autophagy and what does that have to do with fasting?
Autophagy is, in layman's terms, when your body starts breaking down weaker cells and utilizes them in whatever way, for energy and whatnot. One of the things for fasting that is kind of interesting is...
Man, I keep jumping the gun.
I know, you keep wanting to jump forward in these, and I'm like, there's a study here.
Okay, go do more. Get it, Mike.
So one of the studies that I was looking at, because a lot of people are worried, can I have coffee, and can I, have my usual
Jenny straight up gave up
morning.
coffee.
You don't have to.
No,
though.
but she did. Like she straight up gave up coffee because she's like I don't know.
How could you?
I know, that's what I'm saying. But she straight up gave up coffee because she's like, I can't make. She before. I mean, she would have like half of a cup of French vanilla creamer and then just a little drip of coffee.
That's not coffee.
And no,
so she gave up vanilla creamer.
It's coffee flavored sugar milk.
Yeah, she gave up coffee flavored sugar milk. Okay.
Yes.
Well, that's a good thing then.
She drinks a lot of tea now.
One thing about coffee that's important to realize, and there's a study done by the Landis Bioscience, I believe, is in 2014. I believe that's how you pronounce that. That finds that coffee induces autophagy in vivo.
Ooh, in vivo. What's vivo?
I'd have to look up the definition exactly. I mean, it's a pretty common phrase.
In vivo. So coffee
performed or taking place in a living organism. So just in something that's alive.
So coffee being absorbed in something that's alive.
Yeah.
Okay.
Coffee
Cool.
in something that's alive.
I understand why scientists have to overcomplicate things.
Because there's all these different...
Latin.
Yeah.
Dude. In vivo.
You gotta use all the fancy terminology. If you look into that, it actually does increase autophagic flux.
What's flux?
In
like a fluctuation?
All investigated organs. So now it...
Break it down. Break it down. You're going to pull up studies. You got to break it down, Mike.
I know. I'd have to go through. Let's
just layman's term, what did that just say?
In layman's terms, it's just saying that it actually increases the rate of autophagic functions in all the organs.
So you're getting rid of weak cells and your body reproduces stronger cells. So it's like Darwinism in your body.
Kind of. It doesn't necessarily affect the production of healthy cells, but it does use up the weak cells that may cause issues in, like say you have two muscle tissue cells, and you break down the weak one that's maybe possibly could cause cancer, become cancerous, things like that. The weaker cells are more easily... It's so deep. I mean,
the weaker cells are more easily gotten rid of, basically, in your body.
Yeah, the weaker cells just are gotten rid of because, in layman's terms, I'd have to read the whole article to you for you to fully understand.
We can post the article, too.
Yeah, we'll post the article for people so they can read it. Let's jump down.
And as you can tell, Mike is way more knowledgeable about keto and the science behind it than I am. I still do it, and I ask Mike a lot of questions normally, but he's the best person to actually explain, the inner workings of
Well, and
keto.
Basically, I just send him the articles that I've read.
That's true, too, yeah.
And have him read it so he can understand, because it's hard to understand and hard to put into context without reading the whole thing and then going into it. Because I'm not a scientist.
I am definitely.
You're a scientist. What did you get your degree in?
Don't worry about
Bullshit.
it. It's not important. That's like Bill Nye, who claims he's a scientist, but yet I think he has a degree in like mechanical engineering or something like that. Something
Oh my God.
unrelated.
That's what one of my
Don't get me
dad's
wrong.
friends.
Don't get me wrong. Mechanical engineers, they can be smart and shit, but they don't claim to be like scientists on TV and shit.
Although, I mean, we're not much better because we don't have.
We are better, but we're not claiming to be scientists.
We're better just because. Yeah, that's true.
Oh, well, I did.
I'm actually saying that I'm not a scientist, but.
So, are you ready to jump forward? Or am I gonna fuck you up if I do that now?
Real quick, I'm just gonna because there's polyphenols in coffee that promote
sounds delicious.
autophagic functions, and that's. I know you don't know what a polyphenol is, and
well, I know literally. I think every single diet out there. I mean, even the fad diets that don't work and stuff. Every single diet, every single one says black coffee's fine.
Yeah,
black coffee's fine.
So there's got to be a reason for that.
Black coffee. They always told me growing up, oh, it stunts your growth.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously that's not true, but you tell that to kids so they don't drink all your coffee.
Back to fasting, though. I
Yeah.
mean, like, promoting those autophagic functions is good, and that's all part of it, but there's also the part where it stimulates HGH production.
I have yet to do a long fast, though.
Yeah. There's places over in Europe, and I think there might be some in the U.S., I don't know, where they actually have doctors in the in these giant, they're like resorts where people
awesome.
can stay.
Fasting resorts?
And yes, you fast.
So it's a resort with no food.
Yeah, well, they actually do have food they help you safely move into a fasting state, and then they also help you pull yourself out of that fasted state, because when you fasted for a long period of time, you have to be careful of how much you eat.
Right.
Your digestive system slows down dramatically.
You go into starvation mode, essentially, right?
Starvation mode is a thing, and there's a bunch of weird stuff about that, which you'd have to look at research articles to fully understand, so we're back to that point. But yes, I mean, you do go into a starvation mode, and the autophagy is huge. In fasting, there's people who have histamine reactions in their lungs, asthma, and some people have nearly cured themselves or have cured themselves through long-term fasting.
That's crazy. That's like some Buddhist monk shit right there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this goes back into what I was saying about that autophagy point, where it breaks down those weak cells. This is actually a better example than what I had given before. In your lungs, there's cells that are overstimulated by histamine reactions, and I'm probably not putting this in the proper terms, but as they're overstimulated, it's because they're faulty, they're weak, and
they're weak.
When they break,
cull the herd.
Exactly. Evolution, Darwinism is the key.
Cull the herd of the weak cells.
Kill off the weak and
that'd make a good
only
t-shirt
save the strong. Kill off the weak cells. So when you kill off those weak cells, you promote only having the stronger, healthy cells that do not respond to histamine in an improper way. It's kind of deeper than that, but that's kind of a layman's term. So
now, we kind of touched on it a little bit in the last episode. We started talking about cholesterol and dun dun dun. People people talk about the cholesterol. There's good and bad cholesterol, and if you eat all this fat, and especially meat fat, and blah blah blah, then you're gonna get high cholesterol, and it's gonna clog your arteries and your veins and build up all this shit in there, and you're gonna die from a heart attack. So Mike, is it stupid?
Yes.
Yeah. Why?
Well, a lot of people think of cholesterol as being fat, and it is, but LDL is not an actual cholesterol. It's lipoprotein, low-density lipoprotein, and that's usually the one that everybody is always worried about, LDL. With LDL, I mentioned that there was a pattern A and a pattern B LDL
And LDL is the one that's typically known as the
danger one.
the
That's
bad
the one that's
cholesterol.
linked to all these heart attacks and
Dude, it's crazy.
dying
So
because of it.
just to kind of touch on people's perspective of it, like when I worked at Allegiance, we every year they would do like these health screenings and if you got good scores, like if you had good blood pressure and good they would lower your annual deductible by the scores you got. And one of the things is if you had above normal LDL cholesterol, then you had a higher deductible.
Really?
Yeah.
That is ridiculous that they're linking it to your insurance rates.
Yeah, if you were a smoker, which I get. I mean, I get the smoking one.
The smoking one makes total sense because we know factually that smoking is awful for you.
Smoking is bad.
Period.
Okay.
So, but LDL is not. In fact, LDL, you would not survive without it.
I wonder if that happened again, if I could take that study to them and be like, look, dude, it's not bad for you.
Okay. Number one, you'd have to know your science behind it.
True.
And it gets complex, honestly. I mean, it does. Let's click on here. Low density lipoprotein is one of 5 major groups of lipoprotein. This is just on Wikipedia. You can look at this stuff and actually look at their resources and references, which transport all fat molecules. It transports fat molecules.
So they're
around
just
the body.
it's like a vessel for transporting your fat molecules. That's what cholesterol is.
Yes. Well, no, that's what the lipoproteins are.
Oh, gotcha.
So high density lipoprotein, low density lipoprotein, those act as a transport mechanism for fats throughout the body.
So now when people say that, that stuff gets built up in your arteries and stuff, why does that happen?
Well, oftentimes it's actually linked to inflammation due to high blood sugar. Blood sugar in the bloodstream is inflammatory, and so that actually scrapes through your arteries and causes small grooves where lipoproteins can get lodged. And oftentimes it's the low density lipoproteins because they're so much smaller than other lipoproteins, although there are VLDL, and haven't researched that stuff as much. But LDL in and of itself is super important because when a cell requires additional cholesterol, it synthesizes the necessary LDL receptors as well as PCSK9, a protein convertase that marks the LDL receptor for degradation. LDL receptors are inserted into the plasma membrane and diffuse freely until they associate with clathrin-coated pits. When LDL receptors bind LDL particles in the bloodstream, the clathrin-coated pits are endocytosed into the cell.
So that was a fucking mouthful.
Lot of
holy shit.
A lot of techie terminology.
Lingo. So basically, he just said the scientific term for your blood sugar leaves little grooves in your veins and your arteries, and the LDL, since they're so small, they get caught in there, and they do build up.
Yeah, and
so by reducing your blood sugar, right?
But this is more talking about like what its function is for moving cholesterol throughout the body, which cholesterol in and of itself is fat. That is part of fat. And funny enough, you actually raise your LDL amounts because you're moving so much more fat when you start losing body weight and are in ketosis. You have to move that fat to get rid of it.
So overall, I mean, having, when you're on keto, having higher cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, HDL cholesterol is not bad, right?
As far as I know, yes. No. I mean, from what I've read, there is very little that connects LDL and
HDL or any
LDL,
or the LDL
to like heart risk or anything.
Gotcha.
We've thought that there was, and I'm sure there are reasons why they thought that. But as we do more studying, it turns out that sugar and having a high body fat percentage are higher risk than when you have lost that body fat and maintain a healthy body weight.
So you mentioned earlier, we put in quotes, the keto brain. What is the keto brain? And that's a lot to dive into, but how does
how ketosis can affect the brain?
Right? Yep. It does a lot.
Yeah, it does do a lot.
It gives you a ton more energy. It gives you a higher sex drive. It
Clear
gives
mind.
a clear mind, and it does so much because
Well,
why?
one of the reasons why I think that is probably, though I haven't read on this, but this is just from deduction, that your body becomes more adept at utilizing glucose. So for the brain functions that it does use glucose for,
It's more efficient.
you're gonna have a more efficient usage of glucose. Also, you're gonna have ketone energy for certain brain functions, which is also part of it. That's also gonna help.
Yeah, man, even just me being on keto, I have noticed so much of a difference. Just my energy level, my libido, I guess is what they want to call it. That's a politically correct term.
I mean, yeah.
Sex drive, libido, whatever. Which, I mean, was never a problem before, don't get me wrong. But there's that, the amount of energy I have, the focus I have. I genuinely feel like just happier.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, your voice cracked.
I know. So the reason that an increase in libido is probably so apparent is because you're ingesting more fat, which is I mean, I'm sure there probably is some links to cholesterol for sure, but
the fat and the testosterone and all that.
The saturated fat, you're ingesting more saturated fat, so you are going to have an increase in testosterone.
Interesting.
Yeah. As far as its effects on the brain, there's a ton of things that it has been used for in the past. I mean, one of them was epileptic seizures, especially in like children and stuff. They would not respond well to seizure medications always, and so one thing that they tried to do was increase. And I'm kind of curious as to why they started using the ketogenic diet.
There hadn't been a reason
seizures.
for them to be like, "Hey, this might work."
Yeah, I'm sure there's a reason for it, but just as an example of how much it can help is there was a clinical trial at the Great Ormond Street Hospital in 2008 that showed that the diet significantly reduced the number of seizures in children whose seizures did not respond well to AEDs. After 3 months, 4 in 10 children who had started the diet had the number of seizures reduced by over half.
That's
and were
crazy.
able to reduce their medications.
That's awesome. Dude, and seizure medications are not cheap either.
Yeah, you would know. I mean, you worked at the Legions.
Oh, yeah. Oh, for the price of the medications? It's crazy.
Another thing that they noticed in those children is that they had better seizure control, and some had other benefits that were included alertness, awareness, and responsiveness. All of those things were affected by keto, and I think those are pretty common, actually, amongst people who end up switching to keto.
Sure.
I mean, have you noticed that sharpness, that responsiveness?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I still forget things, but that's
obviously everybody does. But
that's
and that's actually a sign of a good, healthy brain, but that's a whole nother subject, you know.
Oh, then mine is perfect.
Because you forget everything.
I forget
everything too.
So much stuff. And Mike
we're
gave me
super smart, clearly.
Mike gave me so much shit for it this last week.
Well, especially with all the math and.
Oh my God, I know.
it was pretty complicated, but we scored the best on our tests.
We did really good. Yeah.
Because of our keto powers.
Keto power. Isn't that what you always say?
Keto power. That's what everybody says at work about me.
So what about keto and things like autism. But there was a new study that just came out recently
Yeah,
about keto and autism, right?
ASD, yeah, what was that? Autism spectrum disorder. I'll look up the study real quick. So
Well, that's just general
vamp for a
autism.
minute.
ASD is just it's general autism because autism is on a spectrum. Everything's on a spectrum, but autism specifically, But there was a study that came out recently that started talking about the benefits of keto in people that are on the spectrum of autism and how it can help them and benefit them. And
Yeah, here is that article.
what is it?
And
What's
who
the title
was
of
it
the
that did
article?
it?
What's the title of the article?
So Napoli Duenas and Giulivi.
That's not what I meant. I meant like this right here.
Yeah. So the title of the article is Potential Therapeutic Use of the Ketogenic Diet in Autism Spectrum Disorder. And we're going to jump down.
This is a huge article.
Oh my God.
Lots of science, lots of numbers.
Yeah. So, number one, let's start out with just we'll just talk about the concluding remarks that these scientists came up with. The scientists' names, so you can look it up yourself, is Eleonora Napoli, Nadia Duenas, and Cecilia Giulivi.
So these look like they're Italian.
Probably
It's an Italian study
yeah.
of some sort or somewhere over there in that way.
So let's go to concluding remarks. So, more research is necessary to understand the potential therapeutic use of the ketogenic diet in autism spectrum disorder, as discussed in length for SSA, ADHD. More specifically, now how this diet may improve mitochondrial function in ASD and how this putative improvement derived from a better energy and or neurotransmitter management may influence behavioral symptoms. There are concerns about utilizing ketogenic diet in patients with metabolic encephalopathies with specific contraindictions in pyruvate carboxylase deficiency, fatty acid oxidation fatty acid oxidation disorders, and Krebs cycle disorders. Thus, given the mechanism of action of ketogenic diet has not been yet fully understood, even in cases of improved behavioral symptoms.
So basically they're saying, hey, this is pretty cool. It showed some cool things, but we need to do a lot more research on it. So
yeah, but it did improve ASD symptoms and I think they did it in mice, which is always an issue because mice are not 100% the same as humans in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
But
how do you tell if a mice has autism?
I'm not sure exactly how they understand that. I'm sure that there's ways to do brain scans or other potential tests.
Now, not only with autism and epilepsy, but there have been signs that have pointed that keto can actually help with cancer patients.
Oh yeah, and that's through that autophagic state that I was talking about earlier.
And most cancer cells require glucose to reproduce. And by cutting out all those carbs, you are limiting your body's stores of glucose in fat cells, and which in turn deprives the cancer cells of the glucose it needs to reproduce.
Oh yeah.
Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's a cure for cancer, but it looks like it definitely is a huge benefit.
Slows the growth of cancer, slows the growth of those lymphomas and
blood cancers and things like that.
Yeah.
And that kind of also, like you said, it goes back to the autophagy, your body purging the weak cells.
Yeah, here's a study done on ketogenic diet in cancer therapy. This article, copyright and license information. Weber et al. So Daniela D. Weber, Sepide, Amanazadeh Gohari. these
Good
are some
Lord.
difficult names to pronounce. And Barbara Kofler, I believe.
Koffler.
Koffler?
We'll say Koffler.
Koffler, for now. So in conclusion of this article, because it's a very long article, in conclusion, clinical applications of the ketogenic diet as an adjuvant therapy for cancer patients first requires that the ketogenic diet be evaluated for its anti-tumor effect for single type genetic subtype of cancer in preclinical setting, as the safety and efficacy of the ketogenic diet strongly depend on the tumor entity and its genotype. Now, that means that there are different types of cancer, obviously.
It may work better for some than others.
It works better for some and than others. Yeah, exactly. So, based on the results of rigorous preclinical and clinical studies performed thus far, the ketogenic diet would appear to be a promising and powerful option for adjuvant therapy for a range of cancers.
So it just basically means that, they're going to still do the traditional cancer, but they're, therapies, chemo, radiation, whatever, but by also doing keto, it can help a ton.
Well, one thing that this study talks about is that the ketogenic diet made cancer cells more responsive to chemotherapy.
Oh, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Dude, chemo's nasty in itself too, though.
Well,
that could be another topic.
Oh,
but,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, there was one documentary, I forget what it was called. I think it was The Science of Fasting, that actually talks about the potential benefits of fasting and cancer patients in chemotherapy.
That would be interesting, because you typically think of, people think of people on chemo and, they need help eating more because, their appetite is so low, and that's why, that was a huge one of the reasons for push for like medical marijuana,
Well, funny enough, one of the things that they're saying is fasting. In that documentary, they talk about fasting being used instead of pushing patients to eat a lot of food, Mm-hmm. When they ate food, they didn't respond as well to chemotherapy and actually had worse symptoms of chemotherapy.
Ooh, that's rough.
Yeah, but people who were in a fasted state actually responded much better and ended up having far fewer negative symptoms of the chemotherapy.
But like we said before, we're not doctors, but if you do have cancer, or if you know somebody who has cancer, maybe ask, tell your doctor, or have them ask their doctor and be like, hey, like, can I try this?
Yeah.
It might work for you.
Is this something that might be utilizable especially in the future, as we get a little more science and do further clinical trials and studies on these? We're going to know a little more. I'm sure doctors are starting to hear about these, and so you might actually get some deeper information. So let us know what your findings are, especially from a doctor.
So let's go over one more potential benefit as far as disease-wise. We kind of already touched on it, but diabetics.
Oh, yeah.
Keto can be hugely beneficial to diabetics, and keto itself has huge. It messes with your insulin a lot.
So keto, just one of the main things is that it helps control blood sugar. Your blood sugar is gonna be at a lower point, no matter what, when you are in a ketogenic diet, because you just are not consuming carbohydrates, which increases your blood sugar. That's important because you're going to increase your insulin sensitivity, and that's basically the key to the diabetics. Having a lower blood sugar, fatty acid. Oh yeah, that's with the that's other stuff. The ketogenic diet for type 2 diabetes. Now, type 1 diabetes is just your inability to create insulin at all. So,
and that's a
Type 2 diet, that's totally different. And so that means that you wouldn't have insulin to...
The keto, I believe they said keto is not good for type 1 diabetics because of their inability to create insulin. And they can...
You'd still have to take insulin. You could be on a ketogenic diet.
Right. But
your insulin sensitivity would actually be higher, which is a good thing.
So here, people that don't know much about keto, they also hear that ketoacidosis.
Right? Oh, don't even...
Well, that's the thing with diabetics, right?
I know. Ketoacidosis, though, is like it's like an increase in proteins. It has nothing to do with actual ketosis. Ketoacidosis. We'll look up the definition real quick. Diabetic ketoacidosis is a serious complication of diabetes, period, that occurs when your body produces high levels of blood acids called ketones. The condition develops when your body can't produce enough insulin.
So it only affects people that are diabetic. That is my point behind that.
Exactly. Well, diabetic ketosis is a serious complication, actually, in diabetics. I mean, it'll cause excessive thirst, nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, shortness of breath, confusion. You'll have high blood sugar levels, hypoglycemia, and high ketone levels in your urine, but you're not using ketones in that state. It has really nothing to do with...
Your body's producing them and you're pissing them out. You're not using them as energy. But it looks like we are about at our time limit for an episode. I know we can go into a lot more, but here's the thing. Our next episode is going to be a lot lighter, not so heavy with information. But after that, though, we're going to get into some really cool things. We're going to start talking about different subcultures throughout the world and throughout America, ones that we personally know about and ones that we're trying to learn more about. But we'll talk about that more next episode. And don't forget to email us at hardlyadultspodcast@gmail.com, facebook.com/hardlyadults, Twitter @hardlyadultspod. We have a YouTube channel. Check it out, subscribe, and share our stuff everywhere.
Keep an eye out for us on CastBox too. We're about to be putting ourselves on there, so
absolutely. So make sure you share us everywhere. To our listeners over, not in America, Australia, Russia, UK, all that. It's probably like nighttime now, so you won't hear it now. But
yeah, right.
Take care.
Adios.